Back in 2012, when I moved 1,200 miles away from my home state, I didn't know anyone in the area. Despite being a rather introverted 22-year-old, I thought it would be good for me to get to know some locals. After joining meetup.com, I browsed several groups until I found one that looked perfect. It was a nearby holistic healing center where they held events ranging from Tibetan singing bowls to psychic fairs. Given my lifelong interest in things of the alternative nature, I was excited by the thought of making some new like-minded friends. I signed up for the next event and attended a few days later. Upon my arrival, I was enchanted by the scent of incense and abundant good vibes. The owner was warm and kind as she introduced herself and the other attendees. Everyone I met was genuine, inclusive, and made me feel very welcome. I am someone who is incredibly close with my family, and it was my first time living alone and far from home. For these reasons, it was wonderful to feel such an instant connection with others. I had a great time getting to know everyone, and before I left, the owner, Rebecca, invited me to come back. That turned into me frequenting the center 4 to 5 times a week. Early on, I met a guy named Rodney at a Reiki circle. Reiki is a Japanese relaxation technique. He was a middle-aged man who was at the early stages of balding and kept his long hair in a low ponytail. His skin was tan and he was in good shape with muscular arms. Compared to my petite frame, he towered over me at about 6 foot tall. Following the Reiki, everyone would always hug one another and chat. Rodney was the first to come over and give me a very long, tight embrace. As we spoke, he told me how he was a single father and introduced me to his teenage son. The three of us hit it off immediately. Rodney and I seemed to have a lot in common, from our love of raw vegan food to scuba diving. It felt like I'd met a kindred spirit, and the energy he exuded was calm and peaceful. He was easy to trust and open up to. Over the coming months, I became Reiki certified and was spending a lot of time at the center. There was a core group of us that became inseparable. Rodney was always part of the gang. We would hold full moon ceremonies at the beach, drum circles at night, and healing sessions by day. Once a week in the evenings, we would go to Panera to get some tea and enjoy each other's company. All in all, it was a very fun time in my life. As time went on, I would see Rodney often. We would meet at farmers markets. I volunteered to help him run a haunted house attraction he was managing, and attended his yoga classes while he was getting his instructor education completed. Rodney and I developed a deep friendship, but nothing more than that. After all, I didn't have those feelings for him. I never got the impression that he did either, and I was close with his girlfriend, who he seemed to be very much in love with. If anything, I would say he was more of a fatherly figure to me. For all these reasons, I let my guard down. A year later, the lease on my apartment was ending, and I decided to move in with my boyfriend who lived about 40 minutes away. The distance, combined with a busy new job, left me with less and less time to visit the center. Eventually, I stopped going, other than the occasional trip to their little gift shop to buy sage and crystals. Rodney and I kept in touch a bit through Facebook, mostly him liking or commenting on my photos. Life happened, and it had been about 2 years since we had last seen each other in person. One day I was on my lunch break at work and went to a nearby grocery store to get some summer rolls. As I walked by the coffee bar, I saw Rodney and his eyes lit up while he opened his arms wide. I was given one of those infamously long hugs while he slowly rocked back and forth. He told me I looked great, and we caught up on what we'd both been up to since we saw each other last. I explained how I started another job not far from the center, so I'd be in the area again. He told me that he and his girlfriend had broken up. Apparently she was incredibly needy and insecure, which seemed untrue as I knew her pretty well. Then, he started to tell me about his new business plans to teach, quote, rich older women yoga. After all, they are lonely and neglected by their husbands, so they want to be touched. Taken aback by his intentions, I continued to listen as he went on. I have a private studio space now. You should come by sometime. We can lay naked in the sun and do some stretches. It would be very healing. I was beginning to feel very uncomfortable. Then again, I thought perhaps I was overreacting. After all, this guy was a total hippie, so it probably didn't seem strange to him. Myself, being flustered and unsure of what to say, said, cool, and pulled out my phone. Oh, hey, I'm running really late for work. I need to get going. It was nice seeing you. He leans in again to give an awkwardly long hug and then kissed me on the lips, something he had never done before. A few weeks passed by. Rodney had sent some texts and Facebook messages about getting together. I lied and said I couldn't because I was busy with my job. Although I felt creeped out about the whole situation, I tried to rationalize with myself that I was being overly dramatic. After all, I had known this guy and his son for years, and he had never done anything to betray my trust. Despite avoiding that grocery store since we last bumped into each other, I had to go back a couple of weeks later to get a specialty item. Since it was a different day of the week, I was certain I wouldn't see him there. Wrong. Avoiding the coffee bar area, I made my way through the back aisles. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, followed by Rodney saying my name from behind me. Despite being unable to shake the anxiety I was feeling, I slowly turned around with a forced smile and said hello. Once again, there was another long-ass hug. He then told me he wanted to hire me for a project he was working on, knowing I was having a bit of a tough time financially. I have a vision for the space I'm working on. I'll do yoga poses naked and have them shot in black and white. I'll hang the pictures in the studio. I want you to be the photographer. He also knew fully well that I used to be a photographer. I paused for a moment and told him I wasn't sure if I would be able to do it. Most of my equipment is still up north, and I don't have the lenses I would need. Another lie, but I really thought we were friends and didn't want to jeopardize that with some weird Leo Kate Titanic-ish photo shoot. Then he tells me that he's sure whatever lens I have will be just fine, and I should stop by the studio tomorrow after I'm off work. He gave me the address, and I tell him I really wouldn't be able to stay long as I need to get home to let my dogs out. Still, he insists I should check the place out, that he wants to give me a tour and he cannot wait to show me. The next day, I drove by the location on my way home, contemplating on whether or not I should go in. My brain kept telling me it was fine. I knew him very well. I knew his son. He was a harmless hippie. Then why couldn't I shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach? So I decided to turn around and went straight to my house. Once I was home, he called me 9 times that same night, but I didn't answer. In the messages, it sounded like he was really angry, but was trying his hardest to come across as calm. The following day, he called me 14 times, mostly just calling, and hanging up repeatedly. After about a week, the call stopped completely and I put the whole situation in the back of my mind. Fast forward to a few months after. I am at the center chatting with my friend Rebecca, who owns the place. We are catching up for a while when I ask her if she has seen Rodney lately. Her eyes become stern, yet panicked. He's not allowed to come here anymore. You need to stay away from him, she warned. Curious to know more, I mentioned how the last time I had seen him, he was acting rather strange. I proceed to tell her about the photo shoot he wanted to do at his new spot downtown. Again, she looked deeply concerned and let out a long sigh. What she told me still shakes me to the core. Apparently, right around the time when he wanted to do our photo shoot, he had gotten arrested for beating the shit out of his new girlfriend. So bad that Rebecca teared up as she described the injuries that put her in the hospital. Not long after, he was arrested a second time for sexually assaulting another woman, as well as other drug-related charges. She continued on to inform me that he had never had any intention of opening a studio. He was totally broke and couldn't afford the lease, but he did know the guy who owned the building. Rodney had a key to look after the place while the owner was out of town. Rebecca knew all of this because she was good friends with Rodney's ex-girlfriend who told her everything while she was in the hospital. My mouth dropped and my heart sank when I heard all of this. A person that I had known for years had attacked women and purposely fabricated a story to get me alone with him. One of the scariest parts to me is that I'm usually such a good judge of character, and he had me completely fooled for a long time. It really made me question my instincts and gave me a lot of trust issues. At least in the end, I did listen to my gut feeling. Not to be dramatic, but it could have saved my life. It's terrifying to think of what his intentions were for me that night. In retrospect, I can see other situations that should have been red flags. I guess hindsight really is 20/20. Looking back, there were things that I overlooked which all make perfect sense now. Maybe, for some, the outcome seems obvious, but at the same time, I really thought he was a great person. Perhaps my younger self was naive and too trusting. All things considered, I can certainly say that I am much more cautious now. I'm sharing this story in the hopes that even just one person will learn something from my cautionary tale. And Rodney, please, let's never meet again. Update. While obtaining verification documentation, I discovered that Rodney is a sexual predator and had a felony warrant issued shortly after our encounter.